The House will be in order.
Let us pray. We ask your blessing upon those who have worked so hard these past few days to help bring our nation to a level of security.
Not a single member was ready on the other side to sit and talk to anyone on this aisle.
Why don't you try working with Democrats? The American people want us to meet in the middle. They don't want this nonsense.
Not all are completely satisfied.
This Harry Reid plan offers no solutions to the broken Washington mess that got us here, so I'll vote no.
This is an inside job.
But help us all to proceed graciously.
Would the gentleman yield?
The American people
Would the gentleman
are looking
yield?
for real solutions.
But the gentleman will not yield. Let me make my point, and I'll be happy to be off.
It's a perfect absurdity, and I will not yield to you.
Remaining vigilant for those values held most dear while being just. Help each member to understand well and interpret positively, as they are able, the positions of those with whom they disagree.
My friends across the aisle voted to rob $500 billion out of Medicare for Obamacare.
What kind of world do people live in?
Grant to each the wisdom of Solomon, and to us all the faith and confidence to know that no matter how difficult things appear to be,
The gentleman will suspend.
you continue to walk with our nation as you have done for over 2 centuries.
I hope for once that once we get past today, that we will not in any way yield again to the voices of 87 members who care nothing about America. They simply care about their way or the highway. I am upset, and we should not do this anymore.
Thank you very much.
It is time for real adults to control this Congress, and they need to control this Congress now.
As God is my witness, we will not compromise on our principles.
How did it get so bad? How did America become so divisive, so dysfunctional? The American system of government is set up for debate and compromise, but with no one compromising, the American system of government is bound to fail. How did we get here? How do we get out?
Good afternoon, and welcome to this terrific day we have, this terrific event, United Citizens. My name is Adam Skaggs. I'm counsel in the Democracy Program at the Brennan Center for Justice. It's a real honor and a distinct pleasure to be able to welcome you to this event. I think the questions we saw that the film Patriocracy poses are important ones, and ones that we hope to explore and offer answers to today. I'd like to take just a quick moment to thank the Bradamus Center here at NYU for hosting this event, sponsoring this event, and bringing us together in this terrific space. And a special word of gratitude and welcome and appreciation to John Bradamus, who is with us here today, and who happens to celebrate his 85th birthday today. So let's give a warm round of applause to John Bradamus. As I said, I work in the Democracy Program at the Brennan Center for Justice, and we're a think tank and an advocacy organization that works on the fundamental issues of democracy and justice. And at the Brennan Center, we believe that if we are to have any hope of solving the many problems that face our nation, we have to start by fixing the systems of government. Our government is broken in many ways, and if we don't resolve these systems, we're not going to be able to solve our problems. I don't need to dwell on all the problems facing the country, whether it's the stagnation in the economy and unemployment that still remains high in spite of some positive developments, a foreclosure crisis that has robbed the homes of millions of Americans, a campaign finance system awash in special interest money that's drowning out the voices of ordinary Americans, or a partisan election system that has erected roadblock after roadblock that threatened to disenfranchise as many as 5 million Americans from participating this November in the elections. We could spend all day talking about these problems, but today we're trying not to focus on the problems, but to move beyond them and talk about the solutions. The problems America faces stem in large part from a government that's mired in dysfunction. Arcane procedural rules have ground action in Congress to a halt, and loud, angry voices have transformed our political dialogue in this country into one that's filled with partisan rancor and incivility. The misinformation and distortion of our democracy have persisted for year after year in recent memory, and they've had real effects and created a toxic culture that is really detrimental to our democracy. The problems with our government are real and they're entrenched, but they're not intractable. And it's the possibility of coming up with solutions that we want to talk about today. And ultimately, we want to recognize that these solutions are not in the hands of anyone else. They're not in the hands of the power brokers in Washington or Albany or anywhere else. They lie with us, with the people. We can always change the direction of our American democracy. We have the tools to do so, and we want to talk about the real ways that we can do that. We want to make a government that responds to the public interest rather than the special interests. And so today we want to explore a wide range of different, realistic, pragmatic approaches, nonpartisan approaches, taking good ideas from both sides of the political aisle to help to improve our democracy. This event today, United Citizens, is about all of us, thoughtful, rational, pragmatic citizens who care about government and who want to fix our country. I personally believe strongly that most, if not all, of our elected officials in Washington and state capitals around the country are real patriotic Americans. They believe in this country and they want to make this country work. And they may disagree about the best way to do that, and they may come up with policy solutions that take wildly different directions. But I think deep down we all believe in the same thing and are working for a government that works for all of us as Americans. But I think even these dedicated and patriotic policymakers are stuck in a system that doesn't work, and they are prevented from making the change that we need to move past some of the problems facing the country. It's up to us as citizens, as Americans, to provide the incentives that we need to get our elected representatives to move past the dysfunction that we find ourselves stuck in today. I'm reminded of Franklin Roosevelt's famous statement when meeting with a group of advocates trying to get his support and pushing him to support and enact some bold legislation. And he listened to them, and then he turned and said, "You've convinced me. I'm behind you. Now go out and make me do it." And that's what we have to do. We have to make them do it. Government is not going to work unless we, the people, show the support that the politicians, the elected officials need to get things done. So that's what we're going to talk about today. You're going to hear from a number of terrific, talented, brilliant leaders, authors, innovators, policymakers, as well as some ordinary Americans who are all working for the same goals: strengthening our democracy, bringing civility back to our political dialogue, stopping the bickering and the partisan posturing, and getting back to work to find real solutions to the very real problems that face us. What we want to do today is lay out a blueprint to give each and every one of us the tools to get involved, to realize that change begins with each and every one of us, and to allow us to have a better impact on our elected officials and on our government as a whole. These are the goals of our seminar today, this afternoon. They're also the goals of this terrific film that we just saw a few snippets of, Patriocracy. And I would urge all of you at the conclusion of today's proceedings, there's an opportunity to see the New York City premiere of Patriocracy just a couple of blocks away at the Quad Cinemas. We'll be talking a little bit more about that, as you can imagine, as the day progresses. But it's an absolutely terrific film that gets at all of these deep problems. So I would urge all of you to head right on over to the theater and tell all of your family and friends that they should do the same. At the end of Patriocracy, there's a quote from Alan Simpson, the former Wyoming senator and the co-chair of the President's Deficit Commission. And Senator Simpson says in a quote that I think just about sums it up, He says, "We're the greatest country in the world. We just have to remember who we are." I think that's just right. And so today, let's remember who we are. Let's step up. Let's revive our democracy. Let's reinvigorate our government, because when we do, the payoff is truly great. Now, let's get started. I believe we have a video we'll get to. One of the most effective ways that we can correct the direction of our political dialogue is through reforming the Congress. We hear about the dysfunction between the right and the left every day, and the partisan posturing that prevents Congress from accomplishing almost anything productive, it seems. Not much gets done, and there are a lot of reasons for this. A lot of the arcane rules and procedures I talked about before prevent meaningful action from passing out of the legislature. But there are also things we can do to improve the way Congress works. Our first guest is a former Republican Congressman from Oklahoma who has a number of insights to share about how we can make the Congress more effective and more responsive to our democracy. Mickey Edwards spent 16 years on the Hill, and since then he has spent a great deal of time teaching, writing, thinking about different ways we can fix Congress from the inside out. Let's have a look.
We really need to get past this idea that we owe our fealty to a party or a party leader or a party spokesman. Nancy Pelosi, when she's Speaker of the House, my job is to elect more Democrats. I didn't know that was the job of the Speaker of the House. You know, Mitch McConnell, as the Republican leader of the Senate, my job is to defeat Barack Obama. Yeah, I didn't know that was his job. You should make your decisions on every single issue on the merits of the issue. The leader of their party can't kick you out of Congress. They can't take away your office. They can't take away your parking space. They can't take away your staff. You know, just tell them to stick it. No idea whether I know how to talk standing still. I've been teaching for years, you know, where you wander around back and forth. But let me say, I am so delighted to be here. Some of you did not raise your hands before when you were asked about whether you were going to go see the film. You ought to see it. You know, Brian has done an incredible job with his film. It's starting to catch fire all across the country. There are people in here who I've worked with for a long time who make the case very well about how bad things are and what needs to be done, and I hope you go see it. I also, just to kind of put this in a little bit of context, you saw at the beginning of that film, the clip from the film, about the way Democrats and Republicans today treat each other, how they react to each other, how they talk to each other. Well, I want to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. And one of the great examples is that when I was elected to Congress as a Republican conservative, don't be shocked, John, as a Republican conservative, one of the people I first got to know and respect and admire for his brilliance, for his commitment to the country, for his sincere beliefs was John Bradamus, the Democratic whip in the House. And John, I am so proud to be with you again. You are such a great model for what the Congress ought to be. So thank you for being here. I also served in the House with Buddy Roemer, who's here, and you'll hear from later, who was a Democrat. And we became good friends. Here's a test to think to yourself. If all of you, and I know a lot of you are well connected to NYU, whether you're students or other people here involved, and this is a great school that John built, and you want to do something for this university. You decide, I would say maybe you need to build a new building, although, John, you've already built so many new buildings, I don't know where they'd put it. But you decide that you're going to build a new building for NYU so they can have more events like this and other kinds of events. And what would you do? You'd gather a group of you together. You would sit down and you would analyze the problem. You would figure out, what do we need? Where do we need it? What land is required? What will be the facilities? How many rooms? What kind of supplies? Who can provide them? You do this all the time in everything you do. Whether it's building a room or a building for a university, or working on something for your local library or for your church or synagogue, you do this all the time. And what's the one thing you do not do? You do not say, okay, all the Democrats go sit over there and all the Republicans sit over here. When I was elected to Congress, I ran with a party label. I had my party label. And when I got to the Congress, I took the oath of office, and I was standing there with a group of people who were elected at the same time I was. So it was people like Dan Quayle and Dick Gephardt and Al Gore, all in my freshman class. And we all took the oath of office together. We were all one team. We were all united. We were all one Congress. And then as soon as we did that, within 30 seconds, we split into rival teams. We voted to have a Speaker of the House. And it's amazing, every Democrat, Southerner, Northerner, whatever their religion, whatever their experience, they all voted for the same guy for Speaker. And every single Republican voted against that guy and for somebody else. And we then decided to set up how we were going to do our committees. And we had committee plans that the majority provided, how many people on each committee. And all the people on one side voted that way, and all the people on the other side voted the other way. When Joe Manchin from West Virginia was just elected to the U.S. Senate, I heard him on NPR talking about the fact that he was shocked when he walked into a committee meeting to realize it's not a committee meeting. It's two committees side by side. It's a Democrat Armed Services Committee and a Republican Armed Services Committee sitting at the same table with the division between them. One of the things, I am a great believer in free enterprise. I believe in the market system. And there's a lesson in the market system. Incentives work. And today, every single incentive in our political system is to not cooperate, to not compromise, to not work with people on the other side of the aisle, to defeat, if you're a Democrat, to defeat a Republican, if you're a Republican, to defeat a Democrat by whatever means you have to do. Why is that? Is that just because the people who are elected today and run for office are not like John and Buddy? That they're all different? That there were good guys, but now they're all gone? Is it a problem with who we elect? Or is it a problem with who elects them? Is it the people? Are the people now stupid? Are the people now not willing to talk to each other? Or is it the system? Is it the system? Let me give you a couple of examples. Mike Castle, former governor of Delaware, longtime congressman in Delaware, moderate centrist Republican, ran for the U.S. Senate. He lost. He lost the primary to Christine O'Donnell. And as a result of losing the primary, because 46 of the 50 states in the United States have what's called a sore loser law, if you have run in your party's the party is a private club. If you have run in your party primary and lost, your name cannot be on the ballot in November. Now, it happens that there are nearly 1 million people in Delaware. Do you know how many votes Christine O'Donnell got that kept Mike Castle off the ballot? 30,000. I don't do math, but 30,000 out of a million seems like a pretty small number. And all of the other people in Delaware, all that million population, did not have a choice about whether or not they wanted Mike Castle to be their senator. Utah. In the state of Utah, there's 3 million people. They had a convention. A guy named Robert Bennett had been United States Senator for years. His father had been a senator. He was a good senator. He was popular, one of the most popular people in the state of Utah. And when they had their election in November to decide who would be their next United States Senator, Robert Bennett could not be considered because he lost in his convention where there were 3,500 delegates. 2,000 of them voted not for him, and he couldn't be on the ballot. Why do we do that? Why do we let small groups of people in private clubs get together and tell you that when you go to the polls in November, look, I know every one of you here. I know this about you. I know one thing about all of you. You believe in choice. You believe in choice in what stereo you buy or what pillows you buy or what soup you buy. You believe in choice in everything in your life except when you go to the polls in November and we allow these two private clubs to tell us who you're allowed to choose between. Well, that's one system. And by the way, I'm not putting all this stuff out without there being solutions. But let me tell you what our system is like. Let's say I'm running for office or you're running for office. And you believe in the incentive system. What is going to focus your mind as to what it is that you need to do? You want to get elected? It's not a matter of what the people in your state want. It's a matter of what the small group of party. Why do you think Olympia Snowe is leaving the Senate? Why do you think so many people bail out? It's not a matter of whether you're popular in your state. It's a matter of whether the small groups of very partisan and more extreme people who vote in the primaries will decide to support you or not. And that's why you see today people like even Orrin Hatch and Dick Lugar starting to move more to the right. They're not playing to the people of their states. They're playing to the people who are going to show up in the primaries and decide. And the Democrats in Connecticut, the same thing happened to Joe Lieberman. But Connecticut is one of the 4 states where you can still be on the ballot, even if you lost in a primary. What are the things that determine what the pressures are on me as a member of Congress, trying to do a job, trying to compromise, trying to say to a great guy like John Bradamus, John, let's sit down together and try to work out how we solve this problem. Education, which is John's great love. How do we solve the problem together? Well, here's what I have to do. I have to concern myself with the primaries because that's how we determine whether or not you can be on the ballot in November. We have to consider our district. We have to consider the congressional district or the state legislative district because in every state, 37 of the 50 states, every state but 13, it is the partisan majority in the legislature that decides what your congressional district is going to look like. Let me give you an example of that. I mean, if you step out from the mic 1 minute, I'm wearing loafers, okay? I'm wearing loafers. I'm wearing loafers with tassels, for God's sake. So who wears loafers with tassels? I mean, I'm a city dude. I am a city dude. And I was elected from Oklahoma City. And I represented the people of Oklahoma City. It's an urban area, almost the size of Boston. And I was a Republican. And I won in a district that a Republican had not won since 1928. And 74% of the people in my district were Democrats. And the result of that was that the other party controlling the majority in the state legislature was deeply offended by my presence and decided to redraw my district. The state of Oklahoma is so big that all of New England fits within its borders. And my district was redrawn from the heart of Oklahoma City, big city, all the way up to the Kansas line, halfway over to the Arkansas line, a giant upside down L. And I said for years, look what they did to me. Poor me. I felt so sorry for me. Look what they did to me. You know, I have to travel all this great distance now to represent my constituents. Had nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me. The Constitution of the United States says that every senator and representative must be an inhabitant of the state from which he is elected. Now, hopefully, he or she is elected. And the idea was, number one, you knew the people in that community. You knew their concerns. You knew their ideas. You know what they needed economically. And they knew you. All of a sudden, I was representing, me the city dude, I was representing wheat farmers and cattle ranchers and small town businesses, and I didn't know their problems, I didn't understand their problems, and they were being denied the right to be represented by somebody familiar with them because we let the parties decide for their own partisan advantage what a congressional district would look like. One more example, then I'm going to start talking about some solutions, but there's lots of these in terms of the incentives. You get to Congress and you want to be on a committee. Let's say that you have spent your life working in healthcare, in the medical care field. God knows we certainly need help in those areas. And so there are committees that deal with those issues, and you want to be on those committees. You want them, it'll help you politically. It'll help you psychically because you'll be able to do things you really care about. You'll be able to do good things for your constituency, and you'll be able to make good policy because you understand the issues. And so you go to the small groups of party leaders in both parties, it's the same, the small group of party leaders, and say, I would like to be on this committee. And here's what they will say to you. They will say, you know, you're right, you have all the credentials. This would be perfect for your community. It would help your career. We will put you on that committee if you promise in advance that you are going to support these 5 items that are important to our agenda. You haven't had a hearing yet. You haven't studied the facts yet. But you are being told you have to fall in line and support our party position or you're not going to be on that committee. I saw it happen. I saw it happen over and over, and it happens in both parties. How do we break out of this? How do we create, I have a new book coming out, just throw this is an aside. I'll just throw out this aside. My book is coming out the end of July, and it's called The Parties versus the People, How to Turn Republicans and Democrats into Americans. And one of the things that I have done in the book is to suggest ways to get beyond that. Now, I don't know how many, are there any political scientists in here? If so, you're just going to cringe like crazy. But one of the things that I support is to have open political primaries where the people decide, not the partisans, who can be on the ballot, so that any one of you who qualifies, whatever the state requires, how many signatures are required or whatever, you know, if you qualify, you can be on the ballot. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, Green, Libertarian, whatever your party, and no matter, there may be 3 Republicans running, there may be 5 Democrats running. And the people will choose, not the activists who come to the conventions, but the people themselves. New Orleans, in Louisiana, they've had that. Washington State in 2006 went to it. Last election, 2010, California voted to do away with partisan primaries and have open primaries. Because 42% of the people in America don't identify with either party. They've rejected both. 42% of the people in the United States are independents or unenrolled or not members of a political party. They have fled the parties. And an open primary system allows the people to have a full range of choices, just like you do when you go buy a cell phone. The second thing, 13 states have nonpartisan, independent redistricting commissions. I don't know if you follow the news, but all of a sudden people, and California is a good example where they just adopted nonpartisan redistricting commissions. People in the California congressional delegation are fleeing Congress. The most recent was David Dreyer, who announced, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, that he's leaving. Jerry Lewis is leaving. Because all of a sudden, they're going to have districts that are drawn according to the needs of the constituents, not by their party supporters to protect their own seats. What I'm trying to do is bring democracy back to democracy. People having the choices about what the districts that represent their concerns, chances to vote for a variety of people. But let me, I didn't write the title for this talk, but I figure I probably ought to quickly get to the point of what what you said I was going to talk about, and that is fixing the Congress from the inside. Just wanted to kind of lay out the problem. In the example that was used up here before of what I said, referring to Mitch McConnell, referring to Nancy Pelosi, could have referred to any number of the other leaders, party leaders forget that they're congressional leaders. They forget that they're legislative leaders. They think of themselves as head of the party. Well, you know what? Under the U.S. Constitution, the Speaker of the House does not have to be a member of the House. Members of Congress can get together and elect anybody they choose, any person of note in the community who may not be connected in any way to any political party, to be the speaker to run the legislative branch, the branch, as I think Buddy and John would agree, the branch that has more power than any other branch of government. We don't have a head of government in the White House. The real powers of our country are in the Congress, and you don't have to have that led by a partisan. In Great Britain, to be the Speaker of the House of Commons, 1/3 of your nominations have to come from a member of another party. People in No Labels, which I've been involved with, support requiring a 60% vote of the House to become Speaker. So that won't happen unless you can get votes from the other party, so that the people who are thinking of themselves as legislators, not as partisans, can come together and put somebody in charge of making sure that bills are considered, that everybody has an opportunity to be heard. And along that line, it's kind of funny. Every committee, this is the United States Congress, not the Republican Congress, not the Democratic Congress. Partisans man the staffs. Why not have nonpartisan congressional staff who will look at the facts, get the data, and present them and let you bring to the job your experience, your knowledge, your concerns, and you make a judgment. I don't know how many of you are fans of Gilbert and Sullivan. I'm sure John is. Gilbert and Sullivan. So in Pinafore, this guy, Sir Joseph, becomes the ruler of the Queen's Navy. In Great Britain, that's a big thing. It had to be the Queen's Navy. It's a little island. And how did he do that? How did he rise to this great, important, powerful position? Well, he sings it, and I'm not going to. But Sir Joseph had served in Parliament, and his answer was, I always voted at my party's call and never thought of thinking for myself at all. Well, that's the way we've set up our Congress, is the way we've set up the staff. So nonpartisan staff. In the U.S. House of Representatives, there's no Robert's Rules of Order. There's a Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee decides what bills can be considered, and it's determined by the Speaker and the people the Speaker controls on the Rules Committee. What if you had a provision that every single piece of legislation, which had at least 100 co-sponsors, that's representing like 50 million people. What if that had 100 co-sponsors would get a hearing and a vote on the floor so that people who might want to represent their constituency, even if it doesn't fit with what their party leaders want, would have a chance to vote on it. You know, I'm not going to go through all of the proposed ways. Let me just say, how do you make this happen? I'm probably running low on time, but how do you make it happen? How do you deal with nonpartisan redistricting? How do you deal with open primaries? 24 states have initiative petitions. In 24 states, the people themselves, you were just talking about, take it in your own hands. That's how it happened in California. It's how it happened in Washington. The people themselves say, we are sick and tired of this partisan bickering. We're going to change the rules. We're going to change the incentives. We're going to turn this country back to doing our service, not the service of the political parties. So using those to change the rules on redistricting, changing the rules on the primaries. And the last thing is about how do you change all these things about nonpartisan staff, nonpartisan speakers of the House. How do you get that poison out of the system? Man, I hate to say it. I hate to pass the burden, going back again to what you said. It's on you. The Washington Post did a story looking back at a Senate in which, just a couple of years ago, in which over 40% of the United States Senate members voted with their party more than 90% of the time. Every one of those people should have been kicked out of office. How do you make that happen? How do you confront people and say, we want a bipartisan speaker or a nonpartisan speaker. We want nonpartisan staff. We want the rules changed. Show up at the next meeting that your congressman has and say, there are other people who can put pressure on you too, and we're telling you, if you don't make the changes, we're going to toss you out of office. It's not a lifetime career. You're not entitled to hold the job. If you want to change the system, if you're angry about this nonstop party warfare that this brilliant film that Ryan has done talks about, it's up to you. Only you can do it. Only you can make it happen. You have to insist, whether it's changing the rules, I don't know what the rules are in New York, about changing the kind of primaries, changing the kind of redistricting, changing the way in the New York legislature. My God, you think Congress is bad. Break down that partisan wall. Make them sit together as members of the same legislature for the same state with their loyalty to the people, not to the party. That's the way you have to do it. You have to do it yourself. So am I out of time, or do I have time for questions or 5 minutes? Okay, yes.
I'm a proponent of range voting, which is now called score voting. And I propose that if we could institute range voting, which would be to give a score to each and every candidate on the ballot, if you'd like to, so that would totally eliminate spoilers, because you could give the same high score to 3 candidates. So you wouldn't have to choose one and seriously devalue the others. What range voting would do, okay, is this on? Okay, so what range voting would do would eliminate partisanship, as I said, because it would remove spoilers. But here's the main thing: what we have is a polarized society where we have 2 opposing demagogues fighting each other out. The Republicans and the Democrats. What range voting finds would be the most generally preferred moderate centrist who doesn't stand a chance at winning either of the polarizing primaries. Here's a logical proof. If you use range voting, I'm getting a little off track because I'm nervous, but I'm sorry. Give me 45 seconds. I'll give you this simple example. Suppose we're all part of a large group that wants to go to a restaurant together. The 3 choices are Chinese food, seafood, and pizza. Half the group loves Chinese food but hates seafood. The other half of the group loves seafood but hates Chinese food. Meanwhile, everybody likes pizza. Where should we go? If this came to a vote with our single option plurality system, or even IRV, the majority would be either Chinese food or seafood, and pizza would have gotten no votes. But I think we'd all agree that for the benefit of the group, like the United States, and so that it wouldn't be a civil war, we would all choose pizza. Hey, let's go for pizza. Everybody likes pizza. That's what range voting would choose. Range voting could choose that pizza. And somebody like Buddy Roemer could win through range voting, but he doesn't stand a chance winning either of the polarizing primaries. The Republicans wouldn't even let him on. So that's why
first of all, let me say that if it could be pepperoni and anchovy, I'm with you. But your point here is that there are many ideas out there, some better than others, some I support, some I don't. But just as with that, or instant runoff voting, or no labels ideas, a whole range of things, there are many ideas out there for us to change the system. And you know what? This is not easy for me because I grew up in the political system. I grew up in the party system. And I will say, for those of you in a university environment, what happened to me was after I left Congress and I went to teach and I got to spend, 15 years backing off and saying, we saw all these problems. What was the root cause? What was the real basis? Money is a contributing factor, obviously, and people are going to talk about that. A lot of contributing factors. What's the root cause of the reason that our system is so dysfunctional? And it's that the system works. It works exactly like it's designed. It's designed to divide us, not as Americans, but as partisans fighting for our party advantage. And there are lots of ways to change it. But if we don't change it, I hate to tell you, I don't care who gets elected president. I don't care who gets elected to Congress. If we don't change the system, we're going to be back here next year complaining again. It's kind of like mulligans. You always want a do-over. You always, every year we elect people and then we go back the next time and complain about the ones we elected. It's the system that needs to be changed. So anyway, well, one more? Okay, back there. The sweater. Beautiful sweater, by the way.
Some of the comments that you get back from people are, I vote, or don't bother me on a weekend, or, it's bizarre. People are angry, but they either don't do anything, or they're lazy, or they don't feel they can do anything. And all of a sudden now, with no labels, they have no budget, no pay in Congress, and all of a sudden people are saying, oh, well, maybe my voice can be heard. My question is, how do you get people to wake up and say you can't not vote in a primary, and all people do is vote in the national election?
Well, I think the answer is in the question, because what you did was you saw a change when you gave them a very specific thing they could do. So that, I will tell you honestly, my book starts out, the first chapter relates what we all know is how bad it is, what the problems are, and the remaining chapters are all about specific changes. I didn't get into them all here, but what you have to do in no labels, because I sit in a lot of the no label strategy sessions. What you have to do is say, you have to do this very specifically. Contact your congressman about this specifically, and that's the only way it works. I'm not making any comments about any particular movement that's going on in the country, but just getting together and blowing off steam and making yourself feel good doesn't change the system. So what you did, does do it. So anyway, thank you for letting me participate in this. I'm glad to be